Hello and welcome. Moss Adams is pleased that you've joined us for today's session, Navigate Cybersecurity for Agribusiness with Confidence. Before we begin, I'm going to play our housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Moss Adams webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
All right, before we get started, I want to acknowledge our big news from last week that Moss Adams is joining forces with Baker Tilly to create a new firm, one designed to serve the needs of the middle market. It's really exciting, and if you can read more about it on our website from the link in the console. And now I'll turn it over to Shannon to dive into today's topic.
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be discussing cybersecurity and some considerations specific for agribusiness. We will cover uses of information technology, advancements in this area, related vulnerabilities and threats, some statistics and cases, as well as safeguards and best practices. As mentioned, we do plan to leave some time for Q&A at the end, so please put your questions in the Q&A window. If we don't have time to get to all of your questions during this session, we will follow up with you after the webinar. So diving in, information technology and agribusiness encompasses a wide range of applications from your ERP systems and farm management systems to precision agriculture, supply chain management, and market access. IT solutions enable better data collection, more accurate analysis, and more informed decision making. This provides for increased efficiency and productivity, increased crop yields a lot of times, and improved sustainability in agricultural practices. However, these tools and technologies can also increase security risks for your organization. There continue to be significant digital transformation in agriculture. We're continuing to see new technologies evolving, which are helping with production efficiency, improved food safety, and understanding of consumer demands for quality and sustainability. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are increasingly being used in ag to enhance various aspects of farming and food processing. These technologies are used in predictive analytics, precision farming, resource management, image recognition, automation and robotics, just to name a few. We see these technologies used in the field, in orchards, as well as in warehouses, and really throughout the supply chain. Blockchain technology is known for its key features of transparency and security and is often used to enhance traceability and trust across the supply chain. This includes product food safety, traceability, data management, and also data sharing. The Internet of Things refers to the network of interconnected devices that communicate and exchange data with each other. So the Internet of Things can play a crucial role in enabling more precise and improved farming practices. This includes everything from sensors and automated irrigation systems to drones and other crop monitoring devices. Also monitoring devices for livestock or automated feeding systems, weather stations, and environmental monitoring devices. So these technologies generate a large amount of data, which can be used in analysis and to gain insights into immediate and long-term trends and patterns. Automation and robotics are significantly transforming agriculture. These technologies are improving efficiency, oftentimes reducing labor costs, increasing crop yields and quality, and improving overall sustainability of ag practices. Food safety technologies are playing a crucial role in modern agriculture by helping ensure food products are safe for consumers. These technologies impact farm to table, so enhancing transparency and traceability and overall food quality, and are also present across the supply chain as well. So overall, advancements in technology continue to be at the forefront of revolutionizing ag. So consider for your organization, there's likely an increased number of devices connected to your networks, more employees are connected to your networks, more data is being collected and stored, likely more integrations across platforms, both up and down your supply chain with vendors and customers as well. And this just leads to overall more risk as a result. So as the ag sector continues to evolve, risks and cyber threats are also evolving and becoming more complex, and oftentimes consequences are more severe. So Bryan is going to share with us some of the related vulnerabilities and threats next.
Thanks, Shannon. So as Shannon mentioned, as the digital transformation continues to take place, what we're seeing is clients are adding more devices, more technology, more interconnectedness with other parties in order to kind of take advantage of the advances in technology. And so that brings kind of new vulnerabilities and threats to this industry that maybe didn't have 10, 20, 30 years ago. So I want to talk just about a few of these here that I think are relevant to keep in mind. So when we think about data breaches, this is now a question of when, not if. There was a time a decade or two ago where a lot of small organizations could kind of fly under the radar. Didn't really have a web presence, didn't really have a lot of technology exposed to the internet. And so you kind of could get away with having kind of limited exposure. That is no longer the case as we live in a continually more integrated, interconnected world. It's a question of how are you going to respond when the incident happens. We'll talk in a little bit about kind of where the source of those happen, those data breaches are, but being able to have good incident response that you can then activate should you have your data breach is really going to be the key to minimizing the impact of those. Just the volume of breaches that we see, continue to skyrocket, and the cost, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Supply chain and third-party risks. So we had a lot of clients who were surprised with the CrowdStrike incident last summer. While not your typical cyber incident as it relates to maybe lost data, it certainly was an operational incident that impacted a lot of companies, and in a way that not many had planned for. And so the risk of disruption from a key supply chain or technology vendor can be devastating. We saw this in the automotive industry with the loss of the CDK Global. If you remember that, there is a SaaS software solution used by a lot of auto dealerships to process the selling of vehicles. And there were days and weeks where dealerships couldn't process the cars. They were, pulling out paper and trying to do things by hand. They estimated that it was about $1 billion loss in sales because of that drop in service from CDK Global. And so, since most of the stuff works most of the time without a hitch, we don't really think about it, or we've even thought we've outsourced that problem. I don't need to think about availability because I've outsourced that to a provider. There's still very much a risk to just the business operation, even if not necessarily a data security risk, with continuing to use third-party providers. So understanding kind of the risks around that. Ransomware attacks. I tell clients all the time that ransomware exists because people pay it. And people, the attackers come because it pays. People will pay the ransom and they'll get money. They wouldn't do this if there wasn't a chance to profit from it. And so how organizations can prepare for, both from a preventative side of, trying to limit people clicking on things, putting some technology in that kind of stops you from clicking on links or validating links before you click on them, are just as important as having the kind of detective what happens after. And I've got a couple of stories that we can share to kind of talk through how our clients are dealing with this. But ransomware is very much alive and well, and continues to do a lot of damage for clients from a cost perspective. And we'll talk a little bit about it when we get to AI and how they're leveraging AI to exploit even more. On the compliance and regulatory risks, for those who are in the public space, new SEC disclosure rules for determining materiality of an incident and the reporting that is required around that, or even just now that you have more data. Shannon talked about how you have more data that's being collected. In some cases, that could be private data or protected data, and having that data. And if you then have a breach, what are the regulatory requirements around the disclosure of that and the notification that comes with that. And so it just adds more burden, especially when maybe you're already dealing with the consequences of our operational loss from being down because of an incident. So considering those things. And then finally, brand reputation. This is an interesting one because I think the sting of a incident is not felt nearly the same as it was maybe 10, 20 years ago, or as big public news. I remember when Target was breached through a third party, part of their supply chain. There's a lot of backlash about Target losing credit card data and people being furious and upset. Don't see that quite the same today. It's become so commonplace, people are almost numb to it. That doesn't mean that there's still not brand reputation and damage that comes from it, and certainly a distraction to management in terms of the operation of the business when there is an incident and the impact to the brand. So these threats are alive and well. All of these have an impact, and part of what you want to consider in the organization is how are you going to then mitigate or address these? I want to talk just a little bit about some statistics from the last year, which is being pulled from Verizon's data breach investigation report and Thomson Reuters around kind of some of the costing. So 68% of breaches are involved a human element. So, organizations spend a fortune on security software and technology to prevent incidents from happening. The single biggest cause is still humans. And as long as humans are involved in operating systems, this is going to continue to be a entry point for attackers. So social engineering, phishing, spear phishing, the variants are continuing to expand, and AI is continuing to drive some of the iteration around that. But that is still the cause of this, and I'll share a story here in a minute around one really sophisticated phishing attack. But this still continues to be the source of incidents. Attackers are financially motivated. While we do know there are nation-state attackers out there that are going after specific critical infrastructure, the vast majority of attackers are financially motivated. They want to get money. They either want to get you to pay a ransom. They want to commit wire fraud, get access to accounting records and vendor records to be able to submit false wires, or steal data and sell it. So they will try to do whatever they can once you are breached and they can get access to your data. And the cost of cyber incidents has reached an all-time high near 10 million. I do think this number is a little inflated, mainly because I think a lot of the low dollar incidents never get reported. And so this data is skewed a little bit high because we see, as I mentioned, some of the SEC disclosures, we see that high dollar reportings are now mandatory. So we're seeing more data around that. And there's certainly some big, very, very expensive incidents and breaches. I don't know if anyone is impacted by the Change Healthcare, for example. I know our family was. Those are significantly expensive, billion-dollar losses, which increase the cost of this. But my experience in working with our clients is it's not uncommon to have costs push the $1 million mark. And these would be immaterial from a SEC perspective, but certainly material to the business in terms of having to deal with the consequences of that. So I want to share a story that I think speaks well to understanding what the different threats are, where a kind of a combination of multiple things happened, and what organizations can do about that. So this particular client was a victim of phishing. This was a little bit of a third-party risk because it was a phishing pretending to be a third party, specifically the bank. And so this client had a relatively small accounting team. They had a CFO, controller, and their accounting staff. And it's an interesting situation. So the CFO received a call on a Friday afternoon notifying them. So this is a call from their bank, notifying them that they had one of their corporate cards had some expected fraudulent charges on it. And they named the vendor and said, there's a $500 charge, and we think this is fraudulent. The CFO said, yeah, it's fraudulent. We don't. That's an incorrect charge. Please cancel the card. Deny the charge. So the bank said, yep, great. We'll work on that. We're going to start to figure out what the source of this was. We'll get back to you. So the bank calls back and says, hey, we've uncovered this. We found the source of this. We think that there may be some suspicious online activity. Would you mind logging in and checking? So the CFO starts to do this. And this is where the CFO starts to say, this is, I appreciate the bank being very proactive, but this is a little weird. So the CFO looks at the caller ID on the phone. The caller ID matches. The phone number matches. The bank person knows the CFO's name. Called their cell phone, right? It wasn't a desk phone or an office phone. So did a little bit of kind of validation thinking, is this right? And again, working in the sense that they're trying to help you prevent something that is pretty common with a fraudulent charge. And so the CFO is now responding to this. They log in, and the bank says, are you seeing this? Like, no. It says, okay, well, can you call a controller to confirm? So the CFO calls a controller. The controller logs in. They're all working together. And at some point during this conversation, the bank says, hey, do you mind if we try to see this with you? The CFO says, sure. They send a one-time code, and that's when the CFO then hands over the one-time code. And as soon as the CFO says that, I'm like, they got you. Because that was the part. They had built the trust. The CFO had confidence this person was from the bank, working with them to try to solve this. They provide the one-time code. The bank says, great, I'm seeing it. Here's what we're trying to work through. Can you start looking through records to see if you're seeing this? In the meantime, the attacker now having granted access. So at some point had managed to get credentials from the CFO, now has the one-time code of the CFO, logs in as the CFO in the bank's web portal, and starts to create fictitious vendors and starts sending fictitious wires. And so in a period of about 17 minutes, the attacker was able to wire about $250,000 out of the account. In the meantime, the CFO starts seeing notifications about new vendor, wire initiated, and calls the bank back. Now this time does an outbound call to the bank, realizes the mistake that they've made, calls the bank. The account rep was able to stop all wires that were in flight. And roll back. And they were able to recover about $175,000. So the total loss was limited to $75,000. But in that course of that 15 minutes or 17 minutes, $75,000 just disappeared, and they're never going to get that back. But the trust and the knowledge that the attacker went through to identify who the CFO was, once they had credentials, figured out what bank they worked through for the company, was able to spoof the phone number, talked intelligently about the business, about what was happening. It's pretty, we're calling it Friday afternoon when people don't want to deal with this stuff, already on a busy Friday. And so very, very, very targeted and very sophisticated. And in this case, in debriefing this with the CFO, they said, we had taken security awareness training. I knew to double check these things, but the part I forgot was, when they started talking about it, I should have said, I'm going to call you back, and hang up the phone and call back. Never accept that from an inbound, haven't gone to the outbound. And the individual knew that was the mistake, because that would have prevented them from essentially disclosing that one-time code. And however, thankfully they had a robust incident response plan. As soon as they started to see the fraudulent activity happening, they're able to activate the incident response plan, get the related parties involved, and very quickly be able to respond to recover, $175,000 from the amount to prevent the loss of the full $250,000. So they were successful and able to get so much of the money back, which is great for them. Still, the CFO was pretty frustrated that they lost the $75,000 and felt really embarrassed by being the victim of that, which they clearly were a victim of a very sophisticated attack. When we think about how AI now plays into that, how how attackers are now using AI and to up-level the sophistication of those attacks. And so in this particular case, you can do a tremendous amount of homework and due diligence on an individual by just asking a chat agent for information. I did this as a thought experiment the other day on myself and said, how much information could I learn about myself, about working in Moss Adams, my role, my education, my background, with just asking ChatGPT some questions. And so I started to explore with that. It was amazing the amount of information, because essentially it could scrape all of LinkedIn, all of my public profile. It wouldn't give me a lot of very personal details, but the network and the ability to find all these things with just a little bit of good prompting will certainly arm an attacker to be able to know how to go and exploit an individual. So understanding the security awareness training, understanding how AI plays into that is one of the things that we encourage our clients to be thinking about as it relates to AI. Having strong security measures, having multi-factor authentication, and using the good IDS, IPS. There's new technology on email that's allows you to see it's from an untrusted sender or an external sender. Flags emails to kind of help bring awareness to, hey, maybe you shouldn't click on something. In this particular client, one of the things that stopped the attacker was they had a dollar threshold set on their wires. So the attacker could only send $25,000 wires. Anything above that required a second approval. You already had two that you could create and send. You needed a third person to essentially a second approval, which was the CEO. And so they had tried to send some bigger wires and couldn't because they got blocked because they didn't have the CEO's credentials. So having a way to kind of segregate duties again helps with some of these things. Implementing threat detection solutions. This is again more of a detective control. As you think about, there's a lot of technologies out there that will start to see suspicious behavior and try to prevent it from expanding. A lot of those are offered kind of as a kind of per device or per user experience. And then just stay on top of what's happening in AI. Webcasts like this is a great solution, way to kind of see what's happening. There's lots of fantastic stories out there around, AI using voice to pretend to be somebody else. And so, when we talk with clients around that, it's having this good procedures in place to say, hey, I don't send a wire, or I don't do something simply because I got a phone call. I needed some other form of authentication of the individual. So with that, hand it back over to Shannon and talk through some of our key takeaways.
Yeah, so to wrap things up, now is the time to be assessing risks to your organization. It's not too late. So As technologies continue to advance, so do cyber criminals. They're upping their game with AI, and we need to be keeping up with that and doing the same. As Bryan mentioned, many of the best practices that we went over, they still apply to AI-based threats. So make sure that you have a playbook in place to defend against these threats. And the cybersecurity landscape, it does continue to evolve and change. So stay vigilant, stay knowledgeable so that you can identify and address new vulnerabilities and threats that might impact your organization. So we have some time left for questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat if you haven't already. Bryan, one that came through. So in a ransomware attack, what are the other options if a company does not pay the ransom?
Great question. So if you choose not to pay the ransom, you can, what happens in a ransomware often is your data becomes encrypted, and the key to unlocking that encryption is what's ransomed. And so if you don't need your data, if you have really good backups of your data, either through an offsite or other kind of mechanism, you can opt to just delete what's encrypted and what's ransomed, and delete that, delete that data, and not pay the ransom. The caution you have with either option, either paying or not paying, is really doing good forensics to make sure that the attacker is out of your environment before you go into restore mode. The last thing you want is to either pay a ransom, to have everything unlocked, only for the attacker to then exfiltrate your data after the fact. Or not pay the ransom and go through all the hassle of rebuilding your data and your network and your systems, only to have the attacker then re-encrypt everything again. So make sure that you have good forensics to kind of a post-incident to make sure that the attacker is truly gone. But you don't have to pay the ransom. If you have good data and good system backups, then in theory you can redeploy and be up to go without having the data that's been encrypted. It's a great question.
Another one we have, how often should companies perform cyber assessments?
It's a really good question. There's a couple of ways that I like to think about cyber assessments. And when we talk with organizations, it's as it relates to cybersecurity, you should have a plan and a direction. And so what I mean by that is you should kind of know where you are, know what your risk tolerance level is, and where your kind of biggest risks relate to cybersecurity are for you, and what maturity you're moving towards. Often an annual is kind of the best guidance around that. It really depends on kind of what your risk tolerance threshold are. We offer a variety of assessments, different levels of sophistication and cost, to help clients think through that based on what's important to them. But doing an assessment as a detective measure to make sure that you are actually doing what you think you are doing is a great way to kind of self-check to make sure that the controls and procedures you have in place are achieving the results that you want.
Thank you, Bryan. Now I'm going to hand it back to Amy to close us out.
All right. Well, thank you, Shannon and Bryan, for a great presentation today. And to our audience, if you have further questions or comments, please reach out to us and we can continue this conversation. You can drop a note in the Q&A window now or reach out to the presenters directly. Their contact information is in the console as well as in the slide deck, which you can download now from the handouts window. And then finally, here's a link to a survey for today's presentation. Your feedback is always appreciated. And again, thank you for joining us, and take care, everyone.